You probably think you're alone when you walk outside. You're not. There is something watching you, something that knows your face, remembers your habits, and talks about you behind your back. It is not a hidden camera. It is not your phone. It is sitting quietly on a wire above your head, and it has been studying you for years. We are talking about crows. For most of human history, we barely noticed them. A crow was just a black bird that showed up near trash cans and cornfields, made an annoying noise, and flew away. Nobody thought twice about it. But that idea is falling apart because scientists recently ran an experiment that changed everything we thought we knew about these birds, and the results are honestly a little frightening. Here is what happened. Researchers collected an enormous amount of crow sound recordings, thousands and thousands of hours of caws, clicks, rattles, and screeches. They fed all of it into a powerful AI system, the kind normally used to study human speech patterns. The plan was simple. Let the machine sort the sounds into categories. Group the food calls together, group the danger calls together. A basic organizing task, nothing more. But that is not what happened. Instead of just sorting noise, the AI started finding patterns, real patterns, structured, repeating, rule-based patterns that looked less like animal noise and more like something with grammar. In human speech, grammar is what turns random words into meaning. It is the difference between a sentence that makes sense and one that is just noise with words in it. The AI was picking up on that same kind of structure in crow sounds, order, sequence, rules. We always assumed that when an animal makes a sound, it is just raw emotion. A dog barks because it is excited or scared. A cat meows because it wants something. Nothing complicated. But this AI was seeing something different in crow calls. It was seeing sentence structure. At one point during the study, the AI locked onto one very specific sequence of sounds. To make it easy to picture, let us imagine a man wearing a bright orange jacket walking through a park where the recordings were being made. A crow called out to the other birds nearby. To a human, it would have sounded like any other crow noise, completely unremarkable. But the AI analyzed the pitch, the rhythm, and the tiny gaps between each note, and it flagged this sound as something unusual. It treated it as a label, an identifier, almost like a name. Days later, the same man in the orange jacket walked through that same park again, and the same crow made that exact same sound. Interesting, sure, but not shocking. Dogs recognize their owners. Cats know the sound of a specific car pulling into the driveway. That is normal animal behavior, except then something stranger happened. A different crow, one that had never even seen this man before, made that exact same call when he walked by a week later. Think about what that actually means. The first crow did not just make a random noise when it saw a familiar face. It created a label for that person and passed the label on to other birds in the flock. That is not simple recognition. That is communication. That is one crow telling another crow, this is who that human is, and the second crow understanding it well enough to use it. The AI found that this specific sound was never used to describe anyone else. It functioned like a name. They had, in a very real sense, given this man an identity in their world, and that is only the beginning of what the researchers found. As the study went deeper, they discovered that these conversations were not only happening in the moment something occurred. Crows were gathering in the trees before certain events took place, making layered, complicated sequences of sounds that looked, according to the AI's analysis, like planning. Not just reacting to the world around them, but discussing it, preparing for it, coordinating around it. Even more unsettling was what the AI found when it looked at the overall content of crow communication. A massive portion of it, possibly the majority, revolved around humans. We are apparently one of the main subjects of their conversations. The AI detected emotional tone attached to different human labels. Some were neutral. A lot of them were negative. There were distinct alert calls for a person carrying a stick versus a person carrying food. Two completely different signals, two completely different levels of urgency. That single detail changes the way you have to look at these birds. For centuries, we treated crows like background noise, like pests, like scavengers not worth a second look. We threw rocks at them. We shooed them off our porches and our crops. But it turns out, this whole time, they were taking notes. They were quietly building files on us. And now, with the right technology, we are starting to be able to read those files. If they have names for specific people, the next question is obvious. Do they keep a memory of those people over time? The data suggests yes. Researchers found patterns that repeated across years, passed down from older birds to younger ones who were not even alive when the original event happened. Your reputation among the local crow population might genuinely be older than your car. There could be a record of you circulating above your neighborhood that you have absolutely no idea exists. And the wild part is that this was still only the surface. The AI had only decoded a small fraction of what it was hearing. Underneath that surface is an entire web of communication that, if it is as complex as early results suggest, would make our own surveillance systems look primitive by comparison. So how is any of this even possible? We are talking about a brain the size of a walnut here. It does not seem like it should be physically capable of anything this advanced. For a long time, we measured intelligence using one specific yardstick, the cerebral cortex, the wrinkled outer layer of the human brain responsible for reasoning, planning, and complex thought. Birds do not have a cerebral cortex. For decades, that fact alone was used as proof that birds simply were not capable of real intelligence. Smooth brain, empty head, end of discussion. But nature does not care about our assumptions. Birds evolved a completely different brain structure called the pallium. It looks nothing like our folded, wrinkled cortex, but under a microscope, the neurons inside it are packed together with incredible density. Pound for pound, a crow's brain processes information at a level that rivals a chimpanzee. That is not an exaggeration. That is why researchers have started referring to certain birds as feathered apes. Take the New Caledonian crow as an example. This species might be the single most advanced tool user in the entire animal kingdom outside of humans, and a handful of great apes. Most animals that use tools just pick up whatever is lying around. These crows do something far beyond that. They manufacture tools from scratch. There's a specific plant with long, spiky leaves that these crows use as raw material. Researchers have filmed them landing on the plant, snipping into a leaf and tearing it in a precise, stair-step pattern to create a hooked, jagged edge. That hook is perfect for fishing insects out of tight crevices and holes that their beaks cannot reach. This is not an accident. This is not trial and error. This is a bird with a design already formed in its mind, executing that design with its beak like a tiny pair of scissors. If the tool breaks, they repair it. If the right leaf is not available, they improvise, using wire or twigs instead, adapting the design to whatever materials they can find. But if you want the single most impressive demonstration of crow intelligence, look at the water displacement experiments. You have probably heard the old fable about a thirsty crow dropping stones into a jar to raise the water level so it could drink. For a long time, people assumed it was just a nice story with a moral. Then researchers decided to actually test it. They set up a tube of water with a floating treat inside, positioned just out of reach for the bird's beak. Nearby, they placed two piles of material, one of heavy stones and one of lightweight foam pieces that would float instead of sink. An animal acting purely on instinct might just throw everything into the tube and hope for the best. That is not what happened. The crow examined the stones. It examined the foam. It paused, seemingly evaluating the situation, and then it began dropping the heavy stones into the tube one at a time, completely ignoring the floating foam. It understood on some level the relationship between density, displacement, and rising water. It solved a physics problem that would take a human toddler far longer to work out, and it did it almost immediately. In a separate test, researchers hid the mechanism of a puzzle box, so the crow could not directly see how pulling one lever would trigger another part of the machine to release food. The birds figured it out anyway, learning to use a stick to trigger a hidden step that eventually caused the reward to drop. They were building a mental model of how an unseen mechanism worked, purely by observing cause and effect. So when scientists tell us these birds might have something resembling a language, it should not come as a total shock. The hardware is clearly there. These are not animals running on pure instinct. They are animals capable of testing ideas, adjusting their approach, and applying logic to new problems. They are constantly studying the world around them, including us, and figuring out how to work it to their advantage. If they can understand how to manipulate physical objects and mechanical systems this well, it is not much of a stretch to imagine them learning how to read and influence the humans around them too. Now let us talk about grudges, because crows do not forget, and they definitely do not forgive easily. Back in 2006, a wildlife researcher at the University of Washington wanted to test whether crows could actually recognize individual human faces, separate from clothing, voice, or body shape. To avoid becoming a permanent target himself, he wore a rubber mask while capturing and tagging a small group of crows on campus for a research study. He was not hurting them, just briefly catching them to attach identification tags before releasing them. Still, the crows were furious. They screamed, they struggled, and once released, they did not calm down quickly. He also used a second, completely different mask as a control, worn on separate days when he was not catching any birds. When he walked around campus wearing that neutral mask, the crows completely ignored him. No reaction at all. But the second he put the original mask back on, chaos erupted. Crows dive-bombed him. They screeched at him. They trailed him across the entire campus, calling out constantly. You might assume this is simply the same handful of birds remembering their attacker. That part alone would be impressive enough. But the truly strange part is what happened over the following years. The number of crows reacting to that mask kept growing. It started with roughly 7 birds directly involved in the original capture. Then it grew to around 20. Then well over 40. Birds that had never personally been caught, birds that were not even alive when the original event took place, began attacking the mask on sight. 5 years later, the researcher walked back onto that same campus wearing the identical mask. The crows still attacked. Most of the original birds involved in that first encounter were likely already dead by then, but a new generation had inherited the information anyway. They knew the face of a threat they had never personally experienced. That tells us something important. The crows did not just react to a bad experience individually. They described that threatening face to each other in enough detail that other birds, including ones born long after the fact, could recognize him and respond to it on sight. It functions almost like a wanted poster passed down through an oral tradition, except instead of paper, it is stored somewhere inside a network of bird brains and passed on through sound and observed behavior. This lines up perfectly with what the AI found in the sound recordings. Remember that identifying call for the man in the park. That is essentially the audio version of exactly what happened on that university campus. Crows appear to maintain some kind of running catalog of specific human faces, tracking small details, distance between the eyes, shape of the nose, the particular way someone walks or moves, and it goes even further than simple recognition. Crows can apparently tell you apart from your neighbor with total confidence. If you regularly feed them and your neighbor throws rocks at them, they will treat you completely differently. They will swoop down to greet you and turn around and cause mischief for the person next door. They are not confusing the two of you. They know exactly who is who, and they update that knowledge constantly. According to the sound analysis, when a previously flagged human enters an area, an alert call goes out almost immediately, spreading the information to nearby birds within moments. This means hiding is not really an option. You can change your outfit, but you cannot change your face. And because this information travels between birds, it is entirely possible to upset a crow near your house, drive across town to a completely different neighborhood, and discover that the local crows there already seem to know something about you. The information can move faster than your daily commute. In a strange way, we are living inside a surveillance system we never signed up for, except the ones watching have wings instead of cameras. They are logging behavior, sorting people into categories, and deciding who counts as a friend and who counts as a threat. And once you land on the wrong list, there does not appear to be much of an appeals process. If the facial recognition side of this is unsettling, their social structure might be even more surprising. Because what researchers are describing is not just a collection of individual smart birds. It looks more like an organized society, complete with its own customs, its own enforcement systems, and even something resembling funeral rituals. When a crow dies, the rest of the flock does not simply scatter and move on. They gather. Anyone who has witnessed this in person describes it as genuinely eerie. One bird discovers the body and lets out a specific, distinct call. A strange quiet follows. Then dozens of other crows begin arriving, landing in the surrounding trees. They do not eat the body. They do not attack it. They simply watch it, sometimes for an extended period of time. For years, people assumed this behavior was some form of grief, and it might genuinely be that, at least in part. But the more recent AI analysis suggests there is also something far more practical happening. It looks a lot like an investigation. The birds appear to be gathering information about the cause of death. Was it a predator? Was it a vehicle? Was it a human holding a weapon? They seem to be collecting evidence in order to share the danger information with the rest of the group. The AI even detected specific low-frequency sounds during these gatherings that seemed to encode details about the cause of death, functioning almost like a warning label attached to the event. On top of that, there's evidence of something resembling a justice system. Researchers have documented what looks like a form of social policing within crow groups. A bird that steals food from a younger or weaker member, or otherwise breaks some unwritten social rule, can end up surrounded by other members of the flock. They will scream at the offender, peck at it, and in some cases drive it away from the group entirely. There is a real functioning system of social consequences at play. That same judgment extends to humans as well. The sound analysis found that crows can tell the difference between a person holding a stick and a person holding a firearm, responding with completely different levels of alarm. They can distinguish between a hunter scanning the treetops and a hiker simply looking down at the trail in front of them. In one particularly striking part of the research, the alert call used for a person holding a weapon was entirely different from the call used for a person holding something as harmless as an umbrella. They appear to understand intent, not just the object itself. Walk outside carrying a broom to sweep your porch, and they will likely stay right where they are. Walk outside with that same broom raised, like you intend to swing it at them, and they will scatter before you even finish lifting your arm. In many ways, they read human body language more accurately than most of us read theirs. Then there is the reward side of the system, which is honestly kind of charming if you think about it the right way. People who consistently feed crows have reported receiving small gifts in return. Shiny buttons, pieces of colored glass, bottle caps, occasionally even coins. According to the sound analysis, the calls associated with these friendly, generous humans tend to be softer and higher pitched, carrying a tone the researchers describe as something close to affection. It looks a lot like an informal trade system, food in exchange for loyalty. Food in exchange for a degree of protection. A small, functioning economy operating between two completely different species. When you put all of this together, funerals, social punishment, trade relationships, and detailed threat assessment, you start to realize these birds are not simply surviving inside our world. In many ways, they have built a parallel society layered directly on top of ours, with its own history, its own customs, and its own list of individuals worth watching closely. And right now, according to this research, a significant portion of their daily communication may be devoted to figuring out exactly which category you personally fall into. Now here is where the story takes its strangest turn. While mapping all of this crow communication, researchers noticed something else entirely. Crows appear to have regional dialects. A group of crows in one city sounds noticeably different from a group in another city, even when discussing the same basic topics. That part makes intuitive sense. Plenty of animals develop regional variation. But what really caught their researchers' attention was how specific pieces of information, a particular danger call, or a label for a new food source, seemed to spread between these different dialect groups, almost like a trend moving through social media. A new sound might first appear in one specific neighborhood. Months later, that exact same vocal pattern shows up in a completely different city, hundreds of miles away, used the same way, meaning the same thing. It travels from flock to flock in a way that looks almost like an analog information network. If a new threat appears somewhere, a new kind of trap, a new predator, a new piece of equipment, the knowledge of that threat has the potential to spread across an enormous area far faster than the threat itself could physically travel. They appear to be updating each other in something close to real time. We tend to assume that only humans can build up knowledge across generations in a lasting way. We write things down. We build libraries and store information digitally. But crows seem to be doing something functionally similar, using nothing but sound and memory, an oral tradition passed from older birds to younger ones. They're not starting from zero with every new generation. They are inheriting the accumulated knowledge of the ones that came before them. And then, right near the end of this particular research project, something happened that nobody fully expected. For months, the AI had been quietly listening, patiently processing an enormous volume of recordings, mapping out the structure, the hierarchy, and the emotional tone hidden inside crow communication. It genuinely felt like researchers were on the edge of a real breakthrough, something close to an actual interspecies translation. Then, in the final stretch of the study, the pattern of the data shifted. The calls changed. A new rhythmic pattern started showing up in the recordings, something that had never been documented before in any prior research on these birds. It was not simply a new regional dialect. It looked more like a fundamental restructuring of how they were communicating. This new pattern spread rapidly through the local population, then began appearing in neighboring territories, moving outward. And as it spread, the AI's confidence in its own translations began collapsing. It was no longer identifying clear structure. It was just recording sound it could not make sense of. Researchers genuinely do not know what caused this shift. The AI is still working through the data, searching for some kind of key that would let it decode the new pattern, and so far it has not found one. But a few behavioral scientists involved in the project have proposed a theory that is difficult to shake once you hear it. They believe the crows figured out they were being studied. These are, after all, birds known for testing boundaries constantly, dropping objects in front of moving cars just to observe the reaction, deliberately provoking predators to gauge how they respond. It is entirely possible they noticed the hidden microphones tucked into tree bark. It is possible they noticed unfamiliar equipment glinting in the leaves, and more than anything, they may have noticed that the humans nearby were behaving strangely, not chasing them away like usual, but standing still, watching, recording, observing, with an intensity that was different from the normal interactions they were used to. They may have realized, in their own way, that they had become the subject of an experiment. If that theory holds any truth, then this shift in their communication might actually be a form of encryption. It sounds far-fetched at first. We like to think of encryption as something distinctly human, something built out of mathematics and centuries of conflict. But remember what these birds are already capable of. They can work through multi-step physics problems on the spot. They can remember and recognize a specific human face for at least 5 years, passing that memory on to birds born long after the original event. They hold something resembling funerals for their dead and pass detailed knowledge down across generations. Is it really such a stretch to think a species capable of all of that might also be capable of realizing it is being listened to and adjusting how it communicates in response? If this theory is accurate, then the strange, scattered noise the AI is picking up now is not a breakdown in communication at all. It is a locked door. They may know we have been listening this whole time, and they may have decided, quite deliberately, to take the conversation somewhere we cannot follow. What sounds like meaningless chatter could simply be a distraction, noise meant to throw off anyone listening in, while the actual information moves through some other channel entirely, one we have not even thought to look for yet. Which leaves us with one final, uncomfortable question. If they are intelligent enough to realize they are being observed, and intelligent enough to hide their communication and response, what exactly are they saying to each other now that they know we are paying attention? What are they planning now that the balance between us has quietly shifted? We used to think of ourselves as the ones doing the observing, watching simple creatures go about their instinctive little routines from a comfortable distance. That assumption does not hold up as well as it used to. So the next time a crow sits on a wire above your head and watches you walk by, ask yourself honestly, is it just a bird passing the time, or is it quietly filing you into a system far bigger and far older than you realized existed? And if they really have gone quiet on purpose, what exactly are they hiding from us now?